Okay, so tonight we're going to continue with the names of God, and this may be the last one in this series, and then we'll start on something else. But tonight, the name of God that we're going to talk about is called Jehovah Rohi, and it means the Lord is my shepherd. And we're going to talk about that name in the very familiar Psalm 23. And so the thing about this is written by David, okay? And we all know that David was a shepherd boy. He knew what it was like to risk his life for the sheep. When he went to fight Goliath, he said, hey, I've killed a lion and a bear. Because he was risking his life for his sheep. And he knew what was involved with the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep. So he wrote this psalm when he was an old man and when he was a king on the throne. And you can tell that by the content of what he says, of what he has experienced. So he's writing this at the end of his life. But when you think about it, in this time period, there were shepherds and sheep all over the place. So this was really appropriate. People could understand this. And even in the New Testament time. Remember, at Christ's birth, there were shepherds with their sheep. That's who the angel first appeared to. So there's always been something going on with shepherds, okay? I could teach a whole message just on the shepherds of the Bible because there's a lot of them. But anyway, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. And when we're going to go through this psalm, we're going to see I and my and mine all over the place because he's talking about his relationship with his shepherd, the shepherd of our souls. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. What that means is I don't have any needs. He is supplying everything. When you think about it, the shepherd always led the sheep. They knew who he was. They knew the sound of his voice. He would take care of them. He would protect them from wild animals. And he would make sure they could have water and pasture. And so they followed him because they cared about their shepherd and knew they had confidence that he would take care of them. But I've seen today videos online of this sheepdog rounding up all these sheep. I mean, it's pretty amazing what this dog can do. But the sheep are running in fear. They're running in fear. The dog's barking and herding them around. But in this time frame, and in the New Testament, the sheep just follow their shepherd. All the sheep from different shepherds would be in one fold. And they would just have somebody who was a doorkeeper. So they would all be intermingling around and socialing around with all the other sheep that they didn't get to see all the time. So then when the shepherd would come in the morning to get his sheep, all he had to do was start speaking. And guess what? Out of all those groups, his sheep would come out because they know his voice. Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice and they know me and they follow me. Okay? So that's what sheep will do. Sheep are pretty stupid, but they know when someone's taking care of them. And so that's what we know about God. And then the second verse. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. Maybe there was desert all around, but he knew where there was a green pasture with tender green grass, and he would lead his sheep there. They could bed down there where it's comfy. And then it said he would lead them by the still waters. You know, when I lived in Missouri, there were a lot of farmers who had cows, and a lot of them would have a pond because it would be still. And cows could come and drink. Or you think of a horse, you have a horse trough for water because running water is hard to drink from. But what it says here, he will lead them beside the still waters. He's even worried about that. Then verse 2, he restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Okay, so now this is all switching from the whole sheep scenario to now it's going inward to the spirit. Now it's not just he's taking care of me physically, he's taking care of me as a soul. He's taking care of me spiritually. He restoreth my soul. All the trials that David had gone through his whole life, God would always restore him. And for us, because we're not in the old covenant, we're in the new covenant, we have the Holy Spirit. We have God's Spirit living in us, and he restores us. And then it says, he leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. If you allow him to lead you, he's always going to lead you in the right way. He knows the way, the sheep don't. And nothing's different with the shepherd of our souls. He knows the way, and we don't. And we need to follow. But it says he does it for his name's sake. So I want you to think about all of these lessons that I've been teaching about his name, right? They're all descriptive of who he is. So he does it for his name's sake, for all those names we've talked about, for who he is. That's why he's doing it. He's doing it for his own name, to uphold his own name. His name defines who he is, as we're finding out with all of these lessons, and it also defines what he does. Then in verse 4, it says, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Guess what? We're all walking in the shadow of death. Death happens just like that. You may think, I've got a long time. Even young people sometimes don't have a long time. There's one per customer. Everybody's going to die. So you want to be ready. You want to be prepared. When he says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he had many times when Saul was trying to kill him. So this man knows what it's like to walk through that valley of the shadow of death. Somebody who has cancer, they may be walking through that valley of the shadow of death. But he says, I will fear no evil. There's another verse that David wrote that said, at what time I am afraid, I will trust the Lord. So there's nothing wrong with being afraid. It's what do you do with that fear? You want to always be trusting God. He can get you through anything. And if you end up leaving your body, well, hey, it's all the better. In his presence is fullness of joy. And he says the reason why he's not going to fear is because for thou art with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. A rod was like a club, and the shepherd would use it to beat off animals, to get them away. And then he might even use it on the sheep for discipline. And then the staff was that rod that had a hook on the end where he could reach out and get a sheep that was maybe going astray or caught in some briars. He could rescue that sheep. So that's why he says, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. But I want to tell you something about our shepherd. And that's the whole chapter of John 10 is about I am the good shepherd. And verse 11 says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. He did that. He gave his life for us, for the sheep. Verse 14, I am the good shepherd and know my sheep and am known of mine, meaning I know them and they know me. And then verse 27, my sheep hear my voice and I know them and they follow me. We hear his voice. That's how we come to know him. First we hear his voice and we respond. And once you respond to his voice, he will guide you and lead you. And you don't have to worry about things. He's going to protect you. Your confidence is in the shepherd of our souls. That's where our confidence is. He knows better than we do how to live this life. Verse 5, Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. So, what he's doing here, God is his host, and he is providing for him, and his enemies can't do a thing about it. They're envious, but they can't do anything because David has God on his side. Mm-hmm. And when he's talking about, thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies, he's talking about a feast. And then next he says, thou anointest my head with oil. What was traditional in that time frame was if you were going to somebody's house and there was a big, let's just say a Thanksgiving dinner. That's what we call a feast, right? Somebody might wash your feet because they just wore sandals and their feet were all dusty and dirty. Or they might anoint your head with aromatic spices and oils. So that was a custom that they had then. And I want to read you just as an example of that. In Luke 7:44 through 47. Jesus was at a man's house, and this woman came in, and she started worshiping him. She started crying. She washed his feet with her tears. She dried them with her hair. And she anointed his feet with oil. And this is what Jesus said. He turned to the woman. He was looking at the woman, but he was speaking to the owner of the house. And he said, see thou this woman? I entered into thine house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she hath washed my feet with her tears and wiped them with the hairs of her head. You gave me no kiss, but this woman, since the time I came in, hath not ceased to kiss my feet. My head with oil thou did not anoint. So I'm showing you how it was a custom of that day. But this woman hath anointed my feet with ointment. Wherefore I say unto you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven. For she loved much. That means if you don't think you need forgiveness, you're not going to be loving God because you're saying, I don't even need forgiveness. I'm a good person. No, you're not. You're not a good person. The only good that's going to come out of you is the Holy Spirit living in you and working through you, and his goodness and loving kindness will pour out of you into this world. And then he says, my cup runneth over. This is beautiful. He's talking about a table setting, but he's talking about joy. His cup isn't just full to the brim. Think about it just running over the rim, because God keeps pouring joy, 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 keeps pouring it. It's just overflowing the brim. That's what this man is speaking about. And then the last verse is, surely goodness and mercy, that's loving kindness, shall follow me all the days of my life. The reason why he's saying that is because when you think about it, he was anointed king when he was a boy. When he was a boy. And from that time on, he went on to slay the giant Goliath. He became king of Israel. He fell into great sin. He had children. His son Solomon became king. But he had a long life. And when he says that they're going to follow me the rest of my life, goodness and loving kindness, he says that because he's speaking about his past. He's thinking, God was with me here. God was with me here. God was with me here with his mercy. Even when I fell into the worst sin, adultery and murder, he was still there ready to forgive me. So he knows that God has been with him through his whole life. So based on his past, he is saying, I am confident of my future, that his mercy and loving kindness will be with me. And then he says, in closing, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. For David, in the Old Testament, think about, where did God dwell? dwelt in the tabernacle in the wilderness, in the Holy of Holies. He came down and wanted to live with his people. And then later, after David, they built the temple, and he dwelt in the temple. What he's saying is, I want to be with God. I want communion with God. And then when you think about in relationship to us, there's another passage, and that is John 14, 1 through 4. And this is Jesus talking to his disciples, the Last Supper. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. And then Thomas questions, hey, we don't know where you're going. We don't know the way. And then Jesus said in verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me. So we can dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We become his house. We become his temple with his Holy Spirit, but we're going to live in his house forever. And that's my message.